This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It is getting fast-tracked to a very, very competitive race to the finish line as we start rounding teams out. And everything looks like it's going to come down to the wire, whether you are in the Eastern Conference, Western Conference, respectively. Teams are certainly jockeying for position to either get out of the play-in, try to get into the play-in, or just simply be the best team going into the playoff chase. So a lot of moving storylines. Obviously, there have been a lot of unexpected injuries that may tilt the landscape of what we're perceiving to see as far as the this current NBA season looks like. And as always, man, always love sharing those thoughts and perspective from my brother from another mother, Mr. Warrenshaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, man? How things for you these days?
Doing good as always, brother. I'm happy to be here. And as you alluded to, a lot to discuss. As you alluded to, the injury bug is going to impact the stretch run here too. And I think that's why we're going to have some conversation about some guys who can impact and help their teams, and maybe as a result of some injury fill-ins or just by a result of some of the stuff that's going on with their teams in general. So I'm excited to have this conversation this week, as always, brother, and look forward to what our fans and listeners have to say about this one.
Great show on tap, man. Again, we're going to be talking about stretch run, Eastern Conference, Western Conference teams. As always, get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA, get at me at GameFace Lead. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. You know where to find us. Be sure to go to www.thebaselinenba.com to check out not only this show, but all of our previous episodes. As always, if you catch us on YouTube, we are saying hello. If you see the blue and white logo, you know that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com in order to check not only us, but the family of great content creators out there who are covering the gamut, whether it's sports, entertainment, music, culture, politics. You name it, we're in it. We're all up in that space. So be sure to go to 19media.com. All right, Shaw. So let's dig in a little bit here. Talk Eastern Conference teams that we feel in stretch run situations. These are the guys that we buy into the idea that they can play a key role, pivotal role at that, for any kind of run, or we should be paying attention to as that run is happening. So I will let you start off, Shaw. Atlanta Hawks, this is a team that is clearly riding the fence, right? The situation with Trae Young's injury has obviously severely impacted, but, you know, we're not giving enough credit, I guess, to Quinn Snyder's ability to keep this team relevant, at least play-in worthy. So as they are going through that, you particularly have one player that people need to pay attention to, because he can really tilt the scales of whether or not this Atlanta Hawks team is for real in their attempts to sneak into the play-in situation.
Yeah, so from this aspect, like even setting the scene a little bit further, we're gonna call these kind of like the stretch run influencers, if you will, guys who have a certain level of role in the team and who can step up here as a result of whatever the circumstances may be, to maybe give their team a little bit more oomph, if you will, and when it comes to their playoff positioning or lack thereof, and trying to get them maybe another seed or higher, if you will. And with Atlanta, Jalen Johnson is a guy I think who's obviously had a breakout year here. The Hawks, in a lot of ways, we can't kind of talk about Jalen Johnson without first talking about Trae Young and the fact that they didn't move DeJounte Murray at the trade deadline. So you can't predict injuries, but Trae Young goes out. So that elevates DeJounte now into that lead role guy. Like, he is the guy. Jalen Johnson has been kind of cruising around as a tertiary and maybe even sometimes fourth option, depending on the night, and how Sadiq Bey may have it going or not have it going. But I think Jalen Johnson has become one of, if not their most important player on this roster. And now with Trae Young out, foreseeably for the remainder part of the regular season, and could potentially be back for a play-in game, Jalen's role now is immense. And he also now, too, is battling a nagging injury as well, too. But what he does in terms of giving them verticality, what he does in terms of being able to get to the basket, having a decent sized jumper, and also being a rebounding threat as well too, is immense to Quinn Snyder's scheme and how he'll be able to play off DeJounte Murray during these final stretch. So for me, that's a guy when you talk about, X factor or whatever you want to call it, Jalen Johnson will keep the Atlanta Hawks along with DeJounte, Clint Capella, DeAndre, and all those other guys like that as well too. DeAndre Hunter, that is, keep them in the playoff mix because right now they're 10th. Can they sneak up to 9th? Not sneak up, but can they get to 9th? At least have a home court in the first play-in game potentially, and then kind of figure things out from there. All that we'll see what ends up happening. But I'm a big fan of Jalen Johnson and his game, and looking to see how he caps the season out here in the final 20+ games.
Listen, when you look at his numbers, like in its totality, nothing is completely jumping off the board per se. Maybe the 8.6 rebounds per game, but what I think, to your point, Shaw, is really important is the role that he plays, his versatility, and how he can insert himself to be a legitimate option to score. I mean, he can seriously, in many respects, kind of elevate himself to being the number 2 scorer if he really chose to, like if his game can elevate in this space of time now. I think that there's more so the sentiment that it's about Bogdanovic and Murray and that combination. But I really think it depends on how Quinn Snyder wants to implement and seeing the potential of Jalen Johnson and what he's been able to do. So it'll be interesting to see, Shaw, because clearly if the Hawks are going to be serious about doing this, they have to shift a little bit of the focus of how their 2-guard game operates and maybe how Murray operates in conjunction with Johnson. Is there opportunity for Johnson to score the basketball effectively? Right now, he's only shooting around 52%, where for his position, it's okay, but you would probably see him maybe more along the lines of 55, 57%. You know what I mean? A lot of that comes down to shot opportunities and also assertiveness. So to me, it'll be very interesting to see how aggressive he thinks he can be, knowing that from now until the rest of the regular season, certified that it's definite that Trae Young is not going to be there. Can he elevate himself to be that guy? Or will he just kind of sit pat and just kind of go with where Snyder and how Snyder and Murray operate this team, so to speak, on the floor for them to elevate themselves and succeed?
Yeah, and I'll close with this aspect. I think that point about Bogdanovic is important because Bogey is somebody who likes to score the basketball. He likes his touches, and I don't think that should come at the expense of Jalen Johnson. And everyone has to step up. Like there's more shots available with Trae Young out of the lineup. But Jalen shouldn't acquiesce to Bogdanovic just because now Bogdanovic is going to continue to start here. And again, likes to get shots up. I think they should figure out a way, obviously, to play off of each other. But as you alluded to, Snyder, to get Johnson involved a little bit more than just say, all right, well, Bogey, you're out here now. Let me just drive and kick and hope you do something out there from the 3-point line. I think that's a great point. And hopefully Jalen will be able to figure out a way to get more shots, but not only shots, but impact the game. It's just not about, getting touches per se, but what are you doing on the defensive side of the basketball? What are you doing rebounding as well too? And can you even initiate some offense off the rebound and maybe drive it up here yourself a little bit? So I like his overall athleticism. I think he's in an upward trajectory in general. Again, he won't win most improved player or anything like that this year, but he's definitely in the conversation, if you will. And I think this is a great opportunity for him and the Atlanta Hawks to try to solidify their play-in spot and maybe hopefully get home court in that first play-in game.
Yeah, absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Talking East Conference player influencers, the teams right now that are currently operating within in either play-in or playoff space. Which players from these teams that we're talking about potentially can be X factors, in having, and not just an influence, but having an impact on the landscape of what the Eastern Conference can eventually look like by the time we get to the end of the regular season. All right, Shaw. So we've talked about this guy numerous times, probably ad nauseum, only because of, I can't believe again we have to come to this point, but we literally have to come to this point. Because just when you think that maybe the Sixers should have done something about this and chose not to do something because Daryl Morey is he must really love him some Tobias Harris, bro. I'm not saying that, when we talk about Tobias Harris, that he is not a great player. Tobias Harris is a good player, man. He's a solid player. He gives you what you can expect in times. But I think for the longest time, we've been waiting to see this level of, we thought, potential greatness from Tobias Harris, in that his ability to score, his ability to, we just keep seeing flashes of it. We never see consistency from it. It never seems to appear in the most critical situations. And so here we come again. When we talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, who obviously have to stand pat until they get back Joel Embiid, which is still not definitive. So as this team kind of trods along and stays above water, again, you come to this point of, what version of Tobias Harris do we think is necessary for the Sixers to maintain and to elevate at some point? Because with Maxey, with Embiid, when they're good, they are great. But are they going to be good enough to beat the likes of the Bucks or the Celtics, or really position themselves well when you still have the uncertainty of Tobias Harris and how he brings what he brings to the table?
And for me, honestly, this is making sure the Sixers stay above the play-in line. This is not even getting into the conversation about, well, what does he do to give them championship opportunities. I think if you're the Sixers, like I said, right now, they're sitting at 7. They're better than playing. Now, again, that difference between 7 and 4 is roughly like a game and a half, 2 games, if you will. So that's why I say he can be a micro influencer in this situation, because Maxey is also battling some injuries. I think some people listening to this are like, listen, as you alluded to, we're tired of the Tobias Harris conversation. He is who he is, blah, 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 blah. Let's pick a guy like Kelly Oubre, or maybe even Buddy Hield, who's a new addition to the roster. But no, it's still going to continue to be Tobias. He has to be a guy who can give them, while Joel is out, 24 to 28 points per game. I mean, legitimately mean that.
Can I throw something on this real quick too, Shaw? Tobias Harris, when you look at his stature, when you look at when he came into the NBA, and then nothing's really changed from that premise, he's still arguably one of the better matchups that the Sixers in many respects could have taken advantage of.
Yeah. And I think also he's gotten some opportunity to do some play creation a little bit as well too this year. Nick Nurse has shifted around that offense and put him in some different spots. But I think now without Embiid there, that gravity is no longer in play, and now you become more of a focal point as Tobias Harris. So just case in point, the last couple of games, if you will, he scores 28 and 31. Those are wins. Now again, Charlotte is not a team that you need to brag about beating, but you beat a semi-hot Dallas team in that. Previous to that, 3 losses. As we're recording this show, and Tobias played, moderately well and bad, I think, in one of those games, especially in that loss against Memphis. So to me, he is definitely a key to what the Sixers are doing, while Maxey is now taking on the brunt of finding out who he is as a lead guy with Embiid out. That allows Tobias, in essence, in some ways, to continue to not skate in the work in the shadows, if you will, because he has to be here in the forefront, but he's still not getting the bulk of the defensive pressure and focus, from these teams. So he's got to step up here. And I think if the Sixers want to not be in that playing game, again, he's going to have to be a 25, I said 24 to 28 point per game guy here, in addition to continuing to get a decent amount of rebounds in that 8 to 10 range, I think regularly, and continuing to even be a ball mover in that 4 or 5 assists a game per game. To me, Tobias has the skill set, as you alluded to. He just got to go out here and show and improve to keep the Sixers afloat here above that playing line.
All right, so for the Chicago Bulls, Shaw, and I can't believe we're talking about the Chicago Bulls. I really can't be. Give credit to Donovan, give credit to Caruso, give credit to White, give credit to DeRozan and all of those dudes. They just there's no quitting this team, man. They defy the logic and law of saying, just stay down. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to be in this, but they want to be in it. They want to upset the apple cart. But you don't think that any of the guys that I mentioned are the people that you really think are going to have an influence on where the Chicago Bulls can possibly end up and land, which is, the premise is they could be playing in the play-in tourney by season's end.
Yeah, and the Bulls are said right now they're 9th, so that puts them in there. There's no real threat right now. I think Brooklyn is more or less called it a season. In addition to all the injuries that they've had, Brooklyn and Toronto would be the closest teams, and they're 5 and 6 games up on that. I think Chicago's in the play-in tournament here now. So now it's how do they keep their first round, if you will, home court advantage, if you will, in the play-in game against the aforementioned Hawks and Jalen Johnson. And because Patrick Williams is now out for the season, Ayo Dosunmu is now getting an inordinate amount of run. And that's why I'm selecting him as a guy who's going to have an impact, because Billy Donovan's like, listen, we're hitching our wagon to you. Yes, Kobe White, DeRozan, Vucevic, Drummond, all those guys are the mainstays. But you need Dosunmu in here to kind of do the dirty work and be able to score at an acceptable level, but also do some secondary play creation when Kobe White and DeRozan will have the basketball. And then again, to play to great defense. He's getting 35 plus minutes a night, sometimes even 40 minutes a night. So Donovan's going to put that level of trust in him to be out there on a regular basis. His plus minus, the intangibles, the things that he's doing out there have to be on a positive side that gives Chicago that leg up here too. And should they be able to hold on to that and then potentially beat Atlanta, then they get, the winner of whoever's 7 and 8 right now, which is obviously still very much in flux. And I think this Bulls team could be a little bit prickly for that 7-8 matchup, depending on who it is. I wouldn't anticipate them beating somebody in the first round if they were to actually get into the full playoffs. But Dosunmu, I think, has a long runway here too, because of all the injuries Chicago has also faced and alluded to. I think he's going to have to do those things on the intangibles to give them a leg up here if they want to be competitive.
For Dosunmu, one of the things that I think is really intriguing to me, Shaw, is there clearly is a level of confidence that not only you see Donovan showing and giving him the extended number of minutes, but I think within Dosunmu is himself. So, you alluded to the that word. I was alluding to and thinking to myself, I'm like, confidence is the key here, right? At some point, he's only 24 years old. At some point, you have to start thinking about, what are some of these younger guys really going to do for us? Are they just going to be role players, or are they really going to assert themselves so that when executive moves have to be made, especially in the offseason? I know I'm getting a little ahead of this, but when you think about this, Shaw, what better way for you to really gauge whether or not, this team can get younger, get better younger, or has to, again, rely on free agency, until certain moves are made and you iron out who stays and goes, then by giving guys like Ayo the opportunities that we're giving him, that are being given to him, and pushing him out there for as long as necessary. And to your point, he's out there doing the dirty work. He's doing all of the little things that it's not that he can't, that Donovan can't expect Vucevic and Drummond and those guys to do. It's clearly they're up against much younger versions of them to be able to do it for a sustained period of time. And so you're now getting that from your young guys. I think that is a good thing. And maybe we're seeing, some diamonds in the rough, so to speak, with the way that this team competes. But I think it all lends itself, to saying this is why this is a Bulls team for playing purposes. They can be a very dangerous team just within the play-in. I'm not talking about in general for the playoffs, but as a young team continues to go through this and all of their effort and everything becomes meaningful, I think it elevates confidence. And I think that's the key term here. When I think about Ayo, he's getting confident. And I think that confidence can be translatable for these guys to maintain where they are and actually do some damage in the play-in. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got a couple more teams that we're going to dive into out of the Eastern Conference that we think are going to be very key pieces, key influencers on determining the outcome of where these teams land. So you do not want to miss out on this. But first, did you know that there's a whole collection of Black-led products that fit into your daily routine and lifestyle that you can get at Walmart? And it's so important that we show Black founders some love, not just during Black History Month, but all year long. Because every time we buy a Black-led brand, we're making room or creating demand for another Black-led brand. Black founders and the products they bring to the table are creating a whole new world of choices at Walmart. Some of the products I want to check out are the Natural Vert Granola, Zach and Zoe Honey, Scotch Porter Beard Balm, and Partake Cookies. Go to walmart.com/blackandunlimited to discover all the amazing Black-owned products that you can add to your daily routine. More Baseline, Callie, Moore, and Shaw. Don't go away. We are back, Callie Warren Sharp, Baseline NBA podcast, and we are continuing our conversation on stretch run influencers in the Eastern Conference. Shaw, the Indiana Pacers, exciting out the gate, all eyes on them, no doubt. They have kind of tapered off a little bit, up and down roller coaster ride with this team. There's no question they're exciting to watch. You, however, believe that there's one player that if we're going to take the Indiana Pacers seriously, and where they're going to wind up, or where their landing spot's going to be by the time we finish this conversation of the regular season for them, specifically this one dude. I was interested. I was sitting here saying to myself, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that you were paying, mindful attention to this guy, but you got to speak to him. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, he is an impact player, and clearly what he brings to the table is going to sway the outcome of what we're talking about here with the Pacers.
Yeah, so with Indiana, they are another team, unfortunately, hit by some injuries. Halliburton, I don't think is still quite right with that hamstring situation, but he's playing through it and playing moderately well. Not quite the same electricity they had before, but they just got a big blow over the course of the weekend. Benedict Mathurin is out for the season. Enter Aaron Nesmith now, who now probably have to soak up most of those minutes. And he was already playing a pivotal role. He started some games. He's been assigned as kind of like their defensive stopper, if you will. But with Mathurin now for the remainder of the season, Nesmith becomes that much more important because I think he'll be thrust into that starting lineup regularly kind of throughout, in addition to taking on the defensive responsibilities. But he's got to produce offensively. I know he came into the league as a guy who wanted to be a three-point shooter. Things didn't work out for him in Boston, but things have worked out for him pretty well here in Indiana. And now during these last 20 plus games, he gets an opportunity to really help Indiana secure their spot. Again, trying to stay above that play-in line. So defense is key. And we know the Pacers have not been the defensive stalwarts of the NBA thus far, but he's a guy who's been trying to hang his hat a little bit on that here since being ousted, I think, from the Boston Celtics. So I look forward to what Nesmith is going to be able to do here, but it's unfortunate that a lot of his role increase here is coming at the result of Benedict Mathurin being done for the rest of the season.
You brought up some really interesting points about, what the expectations can possibly be for Nesmith. I think that it's twofold in that thought process. I think the influence is one, Nesmith's ability, to be more consistent offensively for the Indiana Pacers. If he's going to, really soak up a boatload of those minutes, I'd be interested to see, where Andrew Nembhard it may have a say in some of that, because I think that there's going to be some gameplay going on here by Carlisle and how he utilizes the roster. And that's the reason why it brings me to the point about Carlisle. I want to see what kind of influence Carlisle has on Nesmith. One of the things that I've noticed about Nesmith, and listen, I love his mentality. He is a bulldog. He is unabashed that, he's going to get up in the face of whoever it is that he's defending. But I've also seen as well, too, that he tends to be a little hot-headed. And what I mean by that is he gets overly aggressive and he takes himself out of games or situation. He gets himself in foul trouble and he becomes a detriment where the team needs somebody to stabilize defensively, be on the floor, and be active defensively. And he can't be on the floor because he continuously gets himself in foul trouble because he gets too much into the, I'm not getting the respect, or I need to show you that I deserve to be out here as much as the next person. And I just think Carlisle's calming presence and his attention to detail, I think, is going to be so critical to what you're saying about how important Nesmith's contributions to this team is going to be. I don't think, again, it's going to ultimately be about this team may take a step back a little bit offensively because, to your point, Halliburton is not 100%. But I think this is where you have to have a coming to Jesus moment if you're the Indiana Pacers and realize as you're getting down to these final stretch of basketball games, if you're not scoring at a high level, be scoring at a consistent level, but also make sure that defensively you're somewhere within range where these games become more winnable than becoming tenuous at best. And I think a lot of that is going to come down to, how heady will Nesmith be in his approach to getting these extra minutes and being out on the floor and knowing how important he's going to be for what he's contributing, and not getting outside of himself in order for him to be effective for how Carlisle really is going to have to depend on him for the remainder of these regular season games.
Yeah, I think good point. Definitely he's playing a little bit with a chip on his shoulder, and I think he does get a little bit ahead of
You
himself
don't
at
want him to
times.
lose that, right? You don't want him to
Right.
lose that, but
Yeah, you want to harness it in the positive way. 26 minutes a night, I expect it to go up into the lower 30s, if you will. And if it doesn't, I think it's then because he's not playing well or not utilizing his skill set in the way that Carlisle would most approve. And then that's where guys like Nemhard and some others maybe get an opportunity to grab some of those minutes. But to me right now, he's a guy who has an opportunity, and we'll see if he actually, grabs hold of it in a way that is positive for the Pacers.
Absolutely. Finally, Shaw, as we round out our conversation about the Eastern Conference, let's talk about the New York Knicks. This is a team that obviously is struggling without Julius Randle. Jalen Brunson has clearly shouldered the load, been getting contributions from Josh Hart. They're hoping that Mitchell Robinson comes back. But there's been one bright, shining moment, even as this Knicks team has been going through its ups and downs since the Julius Randle injury, and that's the play of Donte DiVincenzo. And look, I've talked about it. I've been a Donte fan ever since he came out of Villanova, that what this guy can bring to the table as far as his athleticism, his versatility has kept him afloat and kept him as a meaningful role player for any team that he plays on. And you can ask the Golden State Warriors. The only downside to his tenure time there is that team wasn't good enough to try to make a legit run. And I don't even think Steve Kerr utilized him in the way that he could have really been effective, but you're clearly seeing how effective he can be when he's playing like for this New York Knicks team, right? So how important do you see Donte DiVincenzo as far as the New York Knicks go in this stretch run of remaining games in the East?
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a cheat. Won't need to spend a whole lot of time here. I think everybody sees what DiVincenzo's been doing for the majority part of the season, especially since Julius Randle has went down. Bogdanovich and Brooks have come in and be able to provide some semblance, and Bogdanovich more so than Brooks, some semblance of scoring lift for this team. But DiVincenzo continues to be a guy who's playing on both sides of the basketball and really, really important to what they do offensively, especially spacing the floor from the three-point line. So to me, he's had a really, really masterful season. And I think as the Knicks continued the same thing, trying to stay out of that play-in, see if they can actually get into that 4-5 and maybe even have home court advantage if they can avoid the play-in altogether. He's going to be a large part of what's happening here too. So until Randall gets back, until Anunoby gets back, DiVincenzo continues to be, to me, their second option behind Jalen Brunson, with Bogdanovich being the third option kind of coming off the bench.
Yeah, I just think what he's showing you right now could be like quote unquote the peak of his powers, and on the right team, you can clearly see how so important it's going to be. I hope that when the Knicks are fully healthy, that they do not get lost in what is going to be required for them to be an effective team and for everybody to buy into the legitimacy and seriousness of them being contenders in the East. Let it not be remiss that if DiVincenzo is not doing what he's currently doing, I'm not saying he's got to be the primary scorer, nothing like that, but if he's not effective in the way that he's showing you how he can score the basketball, and the Knicks do not figure out a way to keep that consistently throughout this remaining games left in the regular season and ultimately what they're going to need to do in the playoffs, this Knicks team doesn't have a chance to be nearly as competitive as I think people are alluding to thinking that they can possibly be. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we shift our attention now to the Western Conference, and we talk about those guys that are going to have an influence on this stretch run of games remaining in the regular season. Who out in the West should we be paying attention to as we start ironing out getting towards the end of the regular season? You don't want to miss out on that here on The Baseline. This segment of The Baseline is brought to you by McDonald's. Imagine if we were to live in a world where the most iconic creators of anime merge powers with the most iconic creators of the Golden Arches, creating a universe of limitless possibilities, taking our imagination and taste buds to levels unimaginable. Welcome to McDonald's. That's right, not McDonald's, my friend. This is McDonald's. For a limited time, anime fans and lovers of the Chicken McNuggets will have a chance to immerse themselves into their favorite fictional restaurant. And what better way for these iconic tenements of taste to be appreciated than by introducing the bold, new McDonald's savory chili sauce. When you combine your Chicken McNuggets with McDonald's bold savory chili sauce, along with those iconic fries and a Sprite, your taste buds will go Super Saiyan in a hurry. But are you ready? You better be, because this flavorful sauce will only be around till March 25th to go along with your 10-piece McNuggets. Head to your nearest McDonald's and try the new bold savory chili sauce while supplies last. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And now we're shifting our attention to the Western Conference, talking about guys that we believe are going to have an influence on their respective teams as they make that stretch run. First up, Shaw, we're going to talk. I want to do it backwards. We started the way that you had it listed. We started with the Timberwolves, who obviously the number one team in the Western Conference. But I want to go backwards because I want to eventually end up talking about the Timberwolves. I want to start with the Sacramento Kings because we don't get enough opportunity to talk about the Sacramento Kings. This has been an interesting year for them. This has been a team that, while I think last year didn't feel like an admiration, but it almost looks like what they're doing this year gives off the impression that last year was an admiration. I don't want to think that this team overachieved because by all accounts, this is a good basketball team. But if we're really talking about whether or not this team is going to be serious and you think they're going to have an influence, it's got to be more than just talking about Fox and Sabonis and maybe even Barnes. You have one guy in mind that you believe, like, you know what, this dude could really tilt the scales. And if there's ever a time for a coming out party to happen, it is this dude that you have listed.
Yeah, Keegan Murray, I think, in his second year has obviously taken a nice step forward here. The Kings are still good. They're just not at the same pace as they were last year. And we knew they weren't going to sneak up on anybody this year. But I think Keegan Murray's play has been, I want to say inconsistent, but I mean, he's still a second-year guy. And they're needing him because they're trusting him with being a full-time starter, getting, 20-plus minutes a night on a regular basis to really be able to contribute. And while Fox and Sabonis are clearly the lead guys, all-star level talent who do what they do, Malik Monk is a probable sixth man of the year candidate here. They're still looking for that level of consistency, on the perimeter and on the defensive side as well, too, where I think Murray has still trying to find his chops. I know he's still trying to find his chops, as a second-year guy. So if he can be more consistent here throughout the course of this situation, alongside Harrison Barnes, and obviously what they got in Kevin Huerter as well, too, I think this Kings team can stay above that play-in line and make sure that they're in the playoffs here for a second straight season.
So, Shaw, I like how you talked about I don't know, maybe because you're a nice guy. Maybe that's what it is. So you using nice to describe Keegan Murray's step forward, I thought was nice. You were being nice. It's interesting that the word is nice, right? Like, because we gave a lot of praise to Keegan Murray's ascension, so to speak. While he clearly wasn't going to win Rookie of the Year last year or anything like that, we had him on the radar. We were just like, oh, he just needs another year. And I think with the way that the roster has been set up, this should be more or less a kind of a coming out party. So it's interesting to use the terminology for nice for him, because if I'm thinking about the Sacramento Kings, I'm thinking about what's the next level for a guy like Keegan Murray. Like, he needs to make his presence felt. And it just doesn't seem like that's happened this year. To your point, he's taking a nice step forward, but it's not like he put an imprint. It's not like he set himself completely apart this year. Not his fault, so to speak. I'm saying that that's just what it feels like when you look at it in totality so far this year. And where everyone loves to make the Sacramento Kings like the baby Warriors, when we were talking about the elevation of the Warriors leading up to their dynasty, it wasn't like it all came together. There were levels to it. There was Steph Curry, then Klay Thompson, and then Draymond Green, right? And each of them took significant steps the following year before it all came together for them. So I guess in a way, you're hoping that if Keegan Murray finds this space between now and the rest of the regular season to really make an imprint on how important he can be to this team and how important it's going to be for him to be with this team and what he can contribute, I think that to me is what's going to resonate more about our perceptions about whether or not this is like the way that the Kings roster is structured. Keegan, it can fit and can elevate and be as good, because you're looking for that third guy. I don't see it being Harrison Barnes, because that's why you have Keegan Murray. I think Keegan Murray is supposed to be the next level of Barnes, so to speak, in the way that he can go out there and score the basketball. And I think his upside is definitely there more for Barnes, not because Barnes is older, it's because Barnes he's been in the NBA this long. And I think this is what you get from Harrison Barnes, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, the Kings have to really look at what kind of three-headed monster do you really want to have? And I think him only taking a nice jump this year, you have to be able to see for the remainder of this year and possibly whether they're play-in or playoff worthy, the Sacramento Kings, you got to say, all right, Keegan, now is your time, bro. Like, this is your opportunity where you can say, I can run with Fox and Sabonis and be that guy. Because I feel like that's where the Kings are still searching to be effectively competitive against the rest of a very competitive-laden Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't want to forget what Malik Monk is doing. He's their third leading scorer on that team, and Keegan is just behind them. So 15.6 for Murray, for Monk, and 14.7 for Keegan Murray. But Murray plays the third most minutes on the roster, almost 33 a night. So I think it's a matter of what are you doing in those minutes. He's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. 36% from three, so above league average, 46% from the floor. 12 shots a night. You could say maybe his shot diet could be different. Maybe he can get a couple more shots, per game, but at the expense of who? And Barnes is shooting less than 10 shots a game, and so there's not a whole lot more to kind of go around on that aspect. But I think it is the overall level of aggressiveness that you're looking for from the second year guy, because you are putting the hopes on him to take over for Harrison Barnes, like fully and completely, where Barnes can kind of be more of I don't say just a veteran presence, but is not even, Barnes probably is not going to need to be taking 10 shots a night, moving forward, despite what his salary might say. Murray is the guy who they want to and need to be more involved in what's going on in the totality of what they're doing, both offensively and defensively. And I know he has a skill set to do it. He just needs to go out here and prove it here. And I think the Kings are poised to be above that play-in situation. But he's going to have to play a little bit more consistently, in addition to Sabonis giving the triple doubles every single night, De'Aaron Fox doing what he's doing, king of the fourth. Murray giving them that level of consistency will put the Kings on another level.
To me, Malik Monk's impact and the way that he goes out and plays and scores and stuff, you can clearly feel more of where he feels that he needs to be and what presence he brings the moment he gets onto the court. I feel like I'm still searching for that within Keegan Murray, even though I don't question what the game can translate and speak to as to what we're talking about right now.
He's not loud. He really is complimentary and not, in his way where he's like, verbose and kind of what he's doing. It's like, oh, you look up, he had 15 and 5. Oh, that's cool. But
right.
Did you really feel the presence? I'm just
saying. Feel it, right. He got to make us feel you, Keegan. Make us feel you, brother. All right. Let me massage ourselves out of this conversation. All right, let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans, Shaw. Interestingly enough, look, this Pelicans team still relevant. And it's interesting that people still feel like the Pelicans are a team that nobody wants to deal with or play. But you have one guy that you feel will have an influence on that conversation if we're actually going to take the Pelicans seriously.
Yeah, I mean, really quickly, I think Trey Murphy is somebody who a lot of people like, the basketball community is like, oh man, he's got a great skill set, can shoot the three.
If he doesn't rap, if he doesn't get into the rap game, you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Like if he doesn't continue his ascension in basketball, he can get into the rap game. Trey Murphy, I mean, yeah man,
he's got the chops.
Yeah, man, that's a great name to roll with. It would be like bringing back Nelly and his peoples.
Dead.
Anyway.
Well, shout out to Nelly there. But I think Trey Murphy, because his ability to shoot the three ball, especially when they're allowing Zion to play a little bit more point forward towards the middle and latter parts of the season, it gives them spacing that they desperately need. CJ McCollum obviously still very good out there and contributing, but Murphy gives them another dimension. And he's another one when he's in that 20+ point per game range, because defenses do focus on Zion and they do focus on Brandon Ingram as well too. If he can be out there camping out, and then if people try to run him off the line, he has the ability to get up and dunk over people as well too. So he's got to remain. And I think the key here is what we're saying for these third and fourth options on these teams is you got to remain consistent and you've got to remain aggressive, I think, in the role that you're being given. And I think the Pelicans are one of the deeper teams in the league. So it's very easy for him to kind of get lost in that because another guy may have it going. Valanciunas also often goes off for nights where, he's giving you 20 and 15 and things like that as well too. But Trey Murphy, I think, needs to be able to be consistent, especially from that outside line. And then, doing what he does, I think defensively as well too, is going to be impactful for the Pelicans as they too try to stay above the play-in line and secure home court advantage in the first round.
Yeah, everything you spoke to is spot on. And I think the one thing I want to add to that, as it pertains especially to Trey Murphy, is when you have a coach like Willie Green, who is not afraid to go to whoever he feels is necessary for them to win the moment, to win the minute, to win the quarter, to win the game. You have to have the temperament that if one part of your game isn't working, everything else has to be still going and be relevant for you to still be on that basketball court. You know, that's one of the things that I guess is the gift and the curse when you have a former player as your coach, because he can speak to the fact that, hey, I've had those nights where I would love to be out there helping my teammates win games, but me being on the bench was also helping, because if a coach needed to rely on somebody in key minutes to, you know, execute a play or do something, or, you know, this is the rhythm with my top guy is having this kind of like having this, you know, as your five on the floor, then I got to eat that. I got to eat that, and I got to figure out where I can come in and be relevant for this team to win. And that's where Trey Murphy, I think, is going to have, you know, his biggest challenge, so to speak, is when called upon, Willie Green is going to lean on him to execute in certain situations that may or may not necessarily be to the comfort level of Trey, but this will give him the opportunity to show his versatility, right? And expand the level of the Pelicans being as good as everyone says that they're going to be, being as deep as, like how you alluded to being. He's got to be consistent to that point, Shaw, where it may not be the offensive aspect of it, but what you're doing defensively keeps you on the basketball court, because that's exactly what's going to be required if the Pelicans are going to be considered a serious team to contend with. I think as we get to this part of the season, Shaw, we already know which teams are. The most dangerous teams are the ones we're still trying to figure out, because if they get into the playoffs, their matchups can actually be a problem for the teams that we've already cemented and have already kind of egged in, penciled them in as they're going to be the ones playing in the conference finals. And then they run into a buzzsaw when you've got guys like Trey Murphy showing you how they can be a mismatch problem against whoever it is that they're going to wind up competing against. So I think all of this is leading to our point. If the Pelicans are going to be taken seriously, these are the guys that are going to come in and have a big influence on how deep Willie Green can stretch his roster out and run dudes against whoever it is he's going to have to be matched up with when it comes play-in playoff time. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We're talking about stretch run influencers, and we're focusing it on the teams that are out in the Western Conference. All right, Shaw, two more of the teams that we wanted to get into, right? For the Los Angeles Lakers, the buzz right now in La La Land is our boy D. Russ. D. Russ is cooking. And if everybody's asking, I'm not talking about Russell Wilson, okay? We're talking about D'Angelo. Deloading. I find it interesting. I don't know. I got to move off of deloading because he's been loaded. You know what I'm saying? He's a lot to take in. If you're the Lakers right now, what you're getting from him, you are soaking it up. You are enjoying it. D'Angelo Russell is showing you why people can love him, and you hope that he doesn't get to that point why you're going to find out why you might hate him. Now I hate him is a strong word, but I'm just saying, like, when he is in this zone, he is awesome to watch. And then when he takes himself out of it is when you're just like, oh, can we move him already? Right. So if you're Darvin Ham and you're if you're LeBron James, you're Anthony Davis and those guys, this version of D'Angelo Russell you love, you want to continue to see.
I think what's interesting here is I just want to give him his flowers. I mean, it's been said, and obviously there's a lot of Laker coverage out there, so we don't necessarily subscribe to just doing what everybody else does, but he's had a tumultuous season and really was essentially traded, I think, probably 4 or 5 times over. You know, I can't imagine how many trade machine scenarios people ran and put his name into it to acquire whatever superstar or player they thought the Lakers should ultimately have. He's given them a level of consistency, especially since being thrust back into that starting lineup after going to the bench for a good part of the season as well. Can't say enough about his antics, if you will, heroics, really, against the Bucks. 44-point game against the Milwaukee Bucks, game winner, the whole 9. He's really just kind of come into his own. And the Lakers, They need him. Austin Reeves was a guy who I thought was going to be their most important player coming into the season, and I don't think he's not important per se. But what they're getting from D'Angelo with Austin Reeves in the starting lineup as well is giving them an opportunity, at least you will, to be scary in the Western Conference. I'm not going to go so far as to call them contenders, but they are scary. And I think if you give LeBron and AD those weapons, and Russell Guy giving you 20 plus points per game, and giving you 5 to 6 assists, it's something that the Lakers, I think, would take 10 times out of 10. So I shout him out for what he's been able to do here. And he just needs to be able to stay consistent throughout the course of the rest of the season here. Can't fall off a cliff here. And I don't think he will. And the Lakers will have every opportunity to get into the playoffs.
God, it's so frustrating. Remember I told you how much I love D'Angelo Russell when he was coming out of Ohio State? I was just like, man, this kid's going to be good. I don't know why. And then you see that a lot of it is so much of where he, like, his maturity, I guess. And I don't want to go there with that because, at some point it's like you are who you are, right? And I'm not saying that this guy's a headache and a mental case and, he's a disruption of, forget all of that for a moment. When you watch him play, Shaw, how is it that this stuff, it comes so easy for him? He makes it look so freaking easy, bro. I think that's the reason why we're just like, dude, you could do this on a nightly basis if you want to, right? But yet it takes like you losing your starting position. It takes like you getting traded 2-3 times over. It takes like all of this stuff before something lights a fire in his ass, and then all of a sudden he just goes ballistic. And you just hope to catch that lightning in a bottle that nonsense up and just ride that thing for as long as you could possibly ride it before you realize that this damn thing's gonna fizzle out. Watch, something is gonna happen, right? You're just waiting for it. And you just don't ever want that to be the case, because when he's in this zone like he's been in, when he plays like this, bro, he could arguably be one of the most dangerous guards you'll ever have to deal with. His size, his elusiveness, he's not the most athletic guy, but everything he does is so effortless. Reminds you very much of like what you see in Kyrie Irving, right? The effort in which he can score the basketball, the effort in which he can shoot over other guys, the effort in his dribble game, the effort in his ability to get guys good shots. Like it looks so easy for him. And yet we say to ourselves, can the Lakers elevate themselves if this is the version? The problem is when you don't see this version of him, you keep saying to yourself, when the hell is it going to come back? Like you're rubbing the genie lamp so damn hard because you want this to be here as best as you can. You're trying to solve the puzzle of keeping this version of D'Angelo Russell on your roster for as long as you can take it. Ask the Brooklyn Nets that.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's found a certain level of resolve in his game. He's playing with the best control I think we've seen here at least in his Laker tenure. And I know he's had, a couple of years and a couple of stints with the Lakers as well. But this stretch here, especially since being thrust back in the starting lineup, is the best the Lakers could possibly hope for. You just hope it doesn't fail out or flame out, if you will, assuming they get to the playoffs. But I agree, he has all the skill sets, and it's nice to see the game slowing down for him in a way where he knows what he needs to do with this iteration of the roster. And I think that maybe that was probably some of the situation and some of the struggles he had to begin the year, not quite understanding how he needed to fit with what the Lakers had done with all their changes when everybody awarded them, they won the offseason and so forth and so forth. And then those changes didn't really seem to mesh together in the way that the Lakers hoped. He was a part of that, although he wasn't a change. He needed to fit around what the roster now had become. And I think now he's got the best sense and handle of it that he's had all season long.
Absolutely. All right. Finally, Shaw, as we round things out, let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Right now, the Timberwolves and the Oklahoma City Thunder have been jockeying for top position in the Western Conference. But the play of Naz Reid, man, has been so much so that everybody now is recognizing that, like, Illmatic is not just, a slogan or a term. Illmatic now is Naz Reid. You know what I'm saying? My man is like all up in it. Like nobody's business. His ability to shoot, his ability to defend. If anybody is going to take the Minnesota Timberwolves seriously as a team to contend, I know the focus and the attention is going to be about what Gobert, what Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, if he's able to come back, at least reasonably healthy. But for us to really be talking about the relevancy of the Minnesota Timberwolves has to be about with the conversation of Naz Reid's contributions to this team.
Yeah, well, the role, again, as you allude to, it's going to increase because Cat is out. Cat with the meniscus tear now out for probably the remainder of the regular season. Naz Reid is another one who's a lot of people's favorite guys. Like, they just really love his overall game, and I think rightfully so. So we know he can score it. We need to see him rebound, I think, consistently, especially with the minutes that he's now going to get here in Cat's absence. But then can he do it defensively alongside Gobert in the middle for this Minnesota team? That is one of the better defensive teams in the league, to date. This will allow the Timberwolves to, right now, they're battling not only OKC, but the Nuggets have said, you know what, it's that time of the year.
Enter into the chat as well, too.
We up, and they understand what it is. So the Nuggets are vying for home court advantage as well. The Timberwolves could probably, they can slot anywhere between 1 and 3. The Clippers have started falling to the pack a little bit, but the Timberwolves want to make sure they maintain as much in home court advantage as they possibly can, and that still includes, getting the number 1 seed. Naz Reid will and has to be a major player for this Timberwolves team here throughout the course of the regular season, especially now with Cat being out. And I think he will, because they need to make sure that Ant doesn't have to do everything, and that Conley doesn't get miscast here now as a veteran presence. He's a calming presence, but you don't want him now to have to chuck up 15 to 20 shots. You can't expect Gobert, in essence, to do the same thing offensively. Everybody needs to play their role to some degree, and Naz Reid has the most opportunity here to step up and do a little bit more offensively and I think defensively as well.
I think he also brings a different dynamic that I think can be helpful for Anthony Edwards. I think he has an opportunity to help open things up, because I do believe in some respects, Naz Reid shoots the basketball, I think, a little bit better in the corner 3 than when we see from Karl-Anthony Towns. I think Karl-Anthony Towns loves to play top of the key down.
He's a straight on and wing shooter for sure.
Exactly. So what you see from Reid and his ability to float and be able to move himself out in different spaces, I think opens the floor up even more for Anthony Edwards, which I think is going to be key. And I think if you're relying on the innovation of Chris Finch and how this team is going to be competitive, not just for the regular season, but ultimately for the playoffs, it's going to be how he's going to be able to, utilize the rotation in such a way that he can maximize, the elevation of Anthony Edwards, because that will be his time to shine. But more importantly, in certain situations, is it good having Reid and hopefully Karl-Anthony Towns, or Reid and Gobert on that floor as Anthony Edwards is in his bag, so to speak, right? So if I'm Naz Reid, man, I'm just ready for catch and shoot. I'm re-nicknaming Naz Reid Nasty Nas right now, because my man, in his ability to shoot the 3, like the other night against the Cleveland Cavaliers, homie was on one, right? And so that is what I love to see, is if you're going to shoot that ball, you shoot that ball, without any kind of trepidation whatsoever. He was definitely feeling it. And I think if that is the kind of version of Naz Reid that the Minnesota Timberwolves have, they are definitely going to be a dangerous basketball team if and when eventually Karl-Anthony Towns comes back on that basketball.
Yep. Can shoot it consistently, with the level of confidence, but don't neglect the side of the basketball where he needs to be a rebounder as well. Because I know he's not a plus rebounder per se, but I think with Cat being out, somebody's got to take some of that on here, and I think he's poised because he's going to get the minutes.
Rebounder. I believe that there's a difference. You're a plus rebounder and you're a key rebounder, and to me, for the Timberwolves to be effective, he needs to be a key rebounder moving forward. All right, Shaw. Big things being spoken to. Great show all around. And we definitely want people's thoughts about, in the Eastern Conference, Western Conference, respectively, who do they find to be their East and Western influencers? Guys that, we should be putting on the radar and talking about, with their teams respectively, they're going to have a big say on where those teams are going to be positioned when it's all said and done by the time season's end.
Yeah, I hope people will tap in. Let us know who'd we miss. Obviously, we kept out, main and all-star type guys' names because obviously they impact their teams. Like I said, this is really the 3rd and 4th starters on some of these rosters who have an opportunity to really make some impact and make some hay for their teams, at least keep them where they are, or maybe potentially elevate as well too. So let us know who we missed. Let us know what you thought about it. Our picks in general, man, and we'll be happy to get at you on our socials as always on X, at NBA Baseline, and on Instagram NBA_baseline.
Absolutely. Once again, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.